The Galactic Confederation had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. In all that time, no species had ever refused their demands. No world had ever escaped their control. They had conquered over 3,000 civilizations, and the 412 that still existed served them without question. So when a small ship crossed into their space, the Council did not worry. They watched it approach with mild curiosity, like a predator watching a small insect crawl toward its den. Archon Velthrix sat on his throne in the Grand Chamber and waited for a report. He was old, even by the standards of his long-lived species. His scales had turned from bright green to a deep gray, and his eyes held the cold patience of someone who had watched empires crumble at his command. "What do we know about this vessel?" he asked. Intelligence Director Crixa stepped forward. She was younger than the Archon, but her mind was sharp, and her instincts had saved the Confederation from threats many times before. "The ship is small, Archon. It carries no weapons that our sensors can detect. No shields worth mentioning. The hull is thin enough that a single blast from our smallest fighter would destroy it. And the creatures inside? 3 of them. They call themselves humans. They come from a world called Earth, in an unremarkable system at the edge of explored space." Velthrix made a sound of amusement. 3? They send 3 beings to meet the greatest power in the galaxy? They claim to be diplomats, Archon. They are requesting peaceful dialogue. The council members around the chamber laughed. The sound echoed off the ancient walls that had heard the screams of countless conquered peoples. Peaceful dialogue. It was almost charming. "Bring them to me," Velthrix commanded. "Let us hear what these humans have to say before we decide their fate." The human ship docked at the station without incident. Security teams surrounded the vessel, weapons ready, expecting some kind of trick. Surely these creatures would not be foolish enough to walk into the heart of the Confederation with nothing but words. But that was exactly what they did. The airlock opened, and 3 humans stepped out. The first was a woman with dark hair pulled back from her face. She wore simple clothing in shades of blue and gray, and she walked with the calm confidence of someone who had nothing to fear. Her name was Elena Vasquez, and she was the ambassador. Behind her came a man with a friendly smile and curious eyes. Marcus Chen was the cultural liaison, trained to understand and connect with alien species. He looked around at the armed guards with genuine interest, as if he found them fascinating rather than threatening. The third human was another woman, older than the other 2, with short gray hair and a thoughtful expression. Dr. Amara Okonkwo was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. She observed everything with quiet attention, her mind already cataloging details that others might miss. The security team scanned them thoroughly. No weapons, no hidden devices, no cybernetic enhancements or biological modifications. They were exactly what they appeared to be: 3 soft, fragile beings made of flesh and bone. "This way," the guard captain ordered, unable to hide his confusion. What were these creatures thinking? The humans followed without complaint. As they walked through the corridors of the station, they talked quietly among themselves, pointing out architectural details and asking polite questions that the guards ignored. They seemed genuinely interested in everything around them. When they entered the Grand Chamber, the full weight of the Confederation's power was on display. Hundreds of council members from dozens of species filled the massive room. Soldiers lined the walls, their weapons gleaming. Holographic displays showed the vast fleet that protected Confederation space. Thousands of warships capable of destroying entire worlds. At the center of it all sat Archon Velthrix, ancient and terrible, the ruler of everything these humans could see and more. Ambassador Vasquez walked toward the throne without hesitation. She stopped at the proper distance and bowed her head slightly in greeting. "Archon Velthrix," she said, her voice clear and steady. Thank you for receiving us. Humanity is honored to meet the Galactic Confederation. Velthrix studied her with cold eyes. She was smaller than he had expected. Her species had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. Their bodies looked soft and easily damaged. How had such creatures even survived on their homeworld? You come to us with no fleet, he said. No weapons. No army. You bring only words. Why should we listen to anything you have to say? Vasquez smiled. It was a warm expression, genuine and unafraid. Because words have power, Archon. They can build bridges between species who have never met. They can create understanding where there was none before. We believe that our two peoples have much to offer each other. Your two peoples? Velthrix leaned forward. You speak as if we are equals. We are not. The Confederation has conquered thousands of worlds. You have one small planet. We have ships that can burn your entire civilization to ash in a single day. What could you possibly offer us? Friendship, Vasquez said simply. Partnership. A relationship built on mutual respect rather than domination. More laughter from the council. Friendship. These creatures were either incredibly naive or completely insane. Velthrix raised one clawed hand, and the laughter stopped. Let me explain something to you, human. Every species that has entered Confederation space has been given a choice. Submit and serve, or resist and die. There is no third option. There has never been a third option. Perhaps it is time for a new option, Vasquez replied. The chamber fell silent. No one had ever spoken to the Archon this way. No one had ever refused his terms so calmly, so directly, without any sign of fear. Velthrix felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. These humans were clearly outmatched. They had no power, no leverage, nothing that could threaten the Confederation in any way. And yet they stood before him as if they held all the cards. You are either very brave or very stupid, he said finally. Ambassador Vasquez looked at him with steady eyes. We are human, she said, and we would like to talk. Beside her, Marcus Chen was still smiling, his gaze moving from face to face around the chamber. Dr. Okonkwo stood quietly, watching and listening, missing nothing. 3 unarmed humans in the heart of the greatest military power the galaxy had ever known. They should have been terrified. They should have been begging for mercy. Instead, they looked completely at peace. Velthrix did not know it yet, but his empire had just met the most dangerous species in the universe, and they had come with smiles and open hands. 72 hours after the humans arrived, strange things began to happen on the station. At first, no one noticed. A communication was delayed by a few seconds. A data file became corrupted during transfer. A security door opened slightly slower than usual. The technicians blamed the aging systems and made notes to schedule repairs. In the negotiation room, the humans continued their polite conversations. Ambassador Vasquez discussed trade policies and cultural exchange programs. Dr. Okonkwo talked about scientific cooperation between species. Marcus Chen had made so many friends among the junior staff that he was invited to share meals with them daily. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed calm. But beneath the surface, the Confederation was being studied like an insect under glass. Marcus Chen returned from another friendly lunch and sat down with his fellow diplomats. To anyone watching, they appeared to be resting. In truth, they were sharing everything they had learned. The Calari are deeply unhappy, Chen said quietly. They were conquered 4 centuries ago, and they still remember their freedom. The younger generation especially. They do not openly rebel, but the resentment runs deep. The Vrix control most of the food production, Dr. Okonkwo added. If their agricultural worlds were disrupted, the entire Confederation would face starvation within months. They have no backup systems, no alternative sources. Ambassador Vasquez nodded slowly. The council is divided on several issues. Velthrix holds power through fear, not loyalty. Many of the member species would welcome a change in leadership if they thought they could survive it. This was what they had been doing for 3 days. Mapping the cracks in the empire, finding the pressure points, building relationships with people who might become useful allies in the future. And the Confederation had invited them in, fed them, and answered all their questions. Intelligence Director Krixa grew more worried with each passing hour. She had increased surveillance on the humans, watching their every move. They did nothing suspicious. They broke no rules. They were perfect guests. That was exactly what frightened her. She ordered a deeper investigation into human capabilities. Her analysts worked around the clock, digging through every transmission and data fragment they could find from Earth. What they discovered made her blood run cold. Humans did not fight wars the way other species did. They had many different kinds of warfare, and most of them did not involve weapons at all. They had something called psychological warfare. They could break an enemy's will to fight without firing a single shot. They spread fear, confusion, and doubt. They made their enemies question everything they believed. They turned friends against each other and allies into traitors. They had something called biological warfare. They could create diseases that targeted specific populations. Their own. History was filled with examples of plagues that had changed the course of their wars. And they had survived all of them. Their immune systems remembered every disease, while their enemies had no such protection. They had something called economic warfare. They could collapse entire civilizations by disrupting trade, destroying currency, and cutting supply lines. They understood that an army without food cannot fight, that a government without money cannot rule. They had something called information warfare. They could spread lies faster than truth. They could control what people believed by controlling what they heard. They could destroy reputations, expose secrets, and turn public opinion into a weapon more powerful than any bomb. And most terrifying of all, they had something called long-term warfare. They could plant agents in enemy territory who would wait for years, decades, even generations before taking action. These agents would build lives, earn trust, make friends, and gather information. When the time came, they would strike at targets their enemies never expected. Krixa read about human spies who had lived among their enemies for 20 years before revealing their true purpose. She read about secret organizations that had operated across generations, passing their missions from parent to child like family traditions. She thought about Marcus Chun and his new friends. She thought about Dr. Okonkwo and her medical research. She thought about Ambassador Vasquez and her detailed questions about Confederation politics. How long have humans been watching the Confederation before making contact? The answer came from the communications analysis team. They had traced unusual signal patterns near Confederation space, faint transmissions that had been dismissed as natural phenomena. 30 years. The humans had been observing the Confederation for 30 years. They knew everything. Every military base, every trade route, every political alliance, every biological weakness. They had mapped the entire empire without anyone noticing. And then they had sent 3 unarmed diplomats to walk right into the heart of that empire. Krixa finally understood. The humans had not come to negotiate. They had not come to surrender. They had come to deliver a message. They were showing the Confederation exactly how vulnerable it was. She ran to the Archon's chambers and demanded an audience. Velthrix was annoyed by the interruption, but the fear in her eyes convinced him to listen. "They've been watching us for decades," Krixa explained, her voice shaking. "They know our weaknesses better than we do. They know which species hate us, which worlds depend on others for food, which leaders can be bribed or blackmailed. They have all of it. Then we destroy them now. Velfrix said coldly, before they can use this information. You do not understand. They came here unarmed because they do not need weapons. Their weapons are patience and information. If we kill these diplomats, we will not stop the threat. We will trigger it. Trigger what? Crixa pulled up a display showing the Confederation's communication networks. Small anomalies appeared throughout the system, tiny errors that had been happening since the humans arrived. They are already inside our systems, not attacking, not stealing, just watching, waiting. If these diplomats die, humanity will know. And then they will use everything they have learned against us. She showed him the biological data next. Dr. Okonkwo has identified 17 diseases from Earth's history that would devastate our ruling species, while leaving others untouched. Humans survived these plagues. We would not. Then the political analysis. Marcus Chen has built relationships with dozens of dissatisfied individuals across the station. They trust him. They have told him things they would never tell their own leaders. He knows exactly who would rebel if given the chance. Finally, the military assessment. They have mapped every supply route, every agricultural world, every fuel depot. They could cripple our fleet without destroying a single ship, simply by cutting off the resources it needs to function. Velfrix stared at the data in silence. For the first time in his long life, he felt genuinely afraid. They came here to show us that they could destroy us without weapons, Crixa said. 3 people, 3 unarmed humans, and they have already beaten us. The Archon's claws tightened on his throne. What do they want? That is the question. They say they want peace, friendship, partnership as equals. And if we refuse? Crixa thought about everything she had learned about humans. Their patience, their persistence, their absolute refusal to accept defeat. Then they will wait, she said. They will watch. And someday, when we face a crisis, when we are weak and vulnerable, they will be there to push us over the edge. Not because they hate us, but because we gave them no other choice. She looked at the Archon with exhausted eyes. They are not threatening us. They are warning us, and I think we should listen. The negotiations began the next morning in a smaller chamber designed for diplomatic meetings. The room was still impressive, with high ceilings and windows that looked out into the endless darkness of space. But it felt more personal than the Grand Chamber. Archon Velfrix did not attend personally. Such matters were beneath him. Instead, he sent High Diplomat Torvin, a skilled negotiator who had convinced dozens of species to surrender without bloodshed. Torvin was proud of his work. He believed that peaceful conquest was better than violent conquest, though the end result was always the same. The 3 humans sat across the table from him, looking relaxed and comfortable. They had been given quarters on the station, simple rooms that were really just comfortable prison cells. They could not leave without permission. They could not contact their homeworld. They were completely at the mercy of the Confederation, and yet they acted like guests at a friendly dinner party. Let us begin, Torvin said, placing a document on the table. These are the standard terms of incorporation into the Galactic Confederation. Your species will provide workers for our mining operations. Your world will produce food for our fleets. Your scientists will share all their knowledge with us. In exchange, you will receive protection from external threats and access to our medical technology. Ambassador Vasquez picked up the document and read through it carefully. Her expression did not change. When she finished, she set it back on the table. Thank you for sharing this, she said. However, we are not interested in these terms. Torvin blinked. You refuse? We decline, Vasquez corrected gently. We came here to discuss partnership, not servitude. Perhaps we can explore other arrangements? There are no other arrangements. Every species in the Confederation accepted these terms. And how many species have you encountered in total? The question caught Torvin off guard. It seemed harmless enough. Over 3,000, he answered. But only 412 remain in the Confederation today. The others chose resistance. They were dealt with accordingly. Vasquez nodded slowly, as if she had expected this answer. I see. And how were they dealt with, exactly? Were they destroyed completely, or do some populations remain on reserve worlds? Torvin frowned. Why does this matter? We are curious people, Marcus Chun said, leaning forward with a friendly smile. We like to understand the full picture before making decisions. It helps us think more clearly. Over the next several hours, the humans asked more questions. Many more questions. They asked about the structure of the Confederation. How many species served on the Council? How were decisions made? What happened when member species disagreed with each other? They asked about military matters. How large was the fleet? Where were the major bases located? What resources did the Confederation need to maintain its power? They asked about biology. What did different species eat? How long did they live? What diseases affected them? How did they reproduce? They asked about culture. What did people believe? What made them happy? What made them afraid? What stories did they tell their children? Torvin answered most of the questions. They seemed innocent enough, and perhaps if the humans understood how powerful the Confederation truly was, they would accept the inevitable. He called in experts when he could not answer himself. Specialists in history, biology, economics, and military strategy. The humans listened to everything with great attention. Dr. Okonkwo took careful notes on her small device. Marcus Chun nodded along, asking follow-up questions that showed he was truly listening. Ambassador Vasquez thanked each expert personally for their time. By the end of the first day, Torvin felt strangely tired. He had expected the humans to beg, to bargain, to show fear. Instead, they had spent hours asking questions and learning everything they could about the Confederation. He reported this to Intelligence Director Crixa that evening. They are gathering information, he said, but I cannot see what they intend to do with it. They have no fleet to use this knowledge against us. They have no weapons. They are 3 people trapped on a station surrounded by our warships. Crixa listened carefully. Something about the situation bothered her, but she could not identify what. Continue the negotiations, she ordered. Let them ask their questions. Perhaps they are simply trying to delay the inevitable. The second day was much like the first. More questions, more answers. The humans seemed particularly interested in the relationships between different Confederation species. Which ones had joined willingly? Which ones had been forced? Were there any old conflicts or resentments that still caused problems? The Vrix and the Talaran had a war 3,000 years ago, one historian explained. There is still some tension between them, but the Confederation keeps the peace. How interesting, Vasquez said. And what about the Kalari? I noticed they seemed to hold lower positions in the government. The historian looked uncomfortable. The Kalari were among the last to join. They have not yet earned full trust. Marcus Chen made a sympathetic sound. That must be difficult for them. Being treated differently because of something that happened before they were born. Later that day, Chun asked if he could speak with some of the junior diplomats. He wanted to understand what life was like for ordinary people in the Confederation. Torvin saw no harm in this request. What could the human possibly learn from talking to low-ranking officials? Chun spent 3 hours with the young diplomats. He asked about their families, their dreams, their frustrations. He listened more than he spoke. When he finally returned to the negotiation room, several of the juniors seemed reluctant to see him go. They had enjoyed talking to him. He had treated them like old friends. Dr. Okonkwo requested access to the station's medical database. She wanted to learn about the different species in the Confederation, their biological needs, their health concerns. The medical staff were happy to share. They were proud of their work done. By the end of the second day, the humans had spoken with dozens of Confederation citizens. They had collected hundreds of data files. They had made friends with people who should have seen them as enemies, and still, no one understood why. "They are planning something," Crixa said that night, reading through the daily reports. "I do not know what, but this is not normal behavior for a conquered species." "They are not conquered yet," Torvin reminded her. "Exactly. Every other species that refused our terms immediately began building defenses or attempting to flee. These humans do neither. They sit in our station, drink our water, eat our food, and ask questions. Perhaps they have simply accepted their fate and wish to learn about their new masters." Crixa shook her head. "No, I have seen acceptance. This is something else. Look at their eyes when they speak. There is no fear there, no defeat. They look at us like scientists studying an interesting specimen." She paused, a cold feeling growing in her chest. "Or like predators studying their prey." Torvin laughed nervously. "They are three unarmed beings. We have warships that could destroy their entire planet. How could they possibly be predators?" Crixa did not laugh. "I do not know," she admitted, "but I intend to find out. Order a complete investigation into the human species. I want to know everything about them. Their history, their biology, their psychology, everything." She looked out the window at the stars, thinking about three soft creatures who smiled at the most powerful empire in the galaxy. "Something about them frightens me," she said quietly. "And I have not been frightened in a very long time." Intelligence Director Crixa worked through the night. Her team gathered every piece of information they could find about the human species. They analyzed the transmissions that had leaked from Earth over the centuries. They studied the reports from long-range observation probes. They examined the biological scans taken when the human diplomats arrived. By morning, Crixa had not slept. She sat alone in her office, staring at the data on her screen, feeling a cold fear she had never experienced before. The first reports were simple enough. Humans came from a small blue planet in an ordinary solar system. They had developed technology slowly compared to most species. They had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. But then the details became stranger. Humans were persistent predators. On their homeworld, they had hunted animals not through speed or strength, but through exhaustion. They would chase their prey for hours, sometimes days, following it across endless distances until it collapsed from tiredness. The human body was designed for this purpose. They sweated to cool themselves down. They walked on two legs to save energy. Their joints and muscles could endure constant motion far longer than almost any other species in the known galaxy. That they did not stop. They did not give up. They simply kept coming. Crixa thought about the three humans sitting in the negotiation room, asking question after question, never showing any sign of frustration or impatience. They had been doing this for 2 days now. They seemed perfectly happy to continue for weeks, months, or years if necessary. The next section of the report dealt with human history. This was where Crixa's fear truly began to grow. Humans had spent their entire existence fighting each other. From the moment they developed tools, they had used those tools as weapons. They had fought wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over beliefs. Their history was written in blood. Every generation had known conflict. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what they had created in their final wars. Humans had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They called them nuclear weapons. A single bomb could erase a city in seconds. They had built thousands of these weapons, enough to kill every living thing on Earth many times over. And then they had stopped. Crixa read this section 3 times, certain she had misunderstood. Humans had the power to destroy themselves completely. They had pointed these weapons at each other for generations, and yet they had never used them at full scale. They called the strategy mutually assured destruction. Each side knew that if they attacked, the other side would respond. Both would be destroyed. So neither attacked. They lived in a state of constant tension, always one moment away from total annihilation. And they simply continued with their lives. They had stared into the void of extinction and learned to smile at it. The biological data was equally disturbing. Human bodies were filled with billions of tiny organisms. Bacteria, viruses, and parasites lived inside them constantly. Some of these organisms would be deadly to other species, but humans had evolved to survive them. They had suffered through plagues that killed vast portions of their population, and they had simply rebuilt and continued. Their immune systems were remarkably adaptable. When a new disease appeared, their bodies learned to fight it. What killed them one generation became harmless the next. They were survivors on a biological level that most species could not match. Dr. Okonkwo had spent hours in the medical bay, casually asking about the health concerns of different Confederation species. At the time, the medical staff had thought nothing of it. Now Crixa understood. The human scientist had been cataloging weaknesses, identifying which diseases might spread between species, learning which biological threats the Confederation had no defense against. The psychological profiles were, perhaps the most troubling of all, humans possessed a quality that the translation software struggled to define. The closest approximation was spite or stubbornness, but these words did not capture the full meaning. When pushed, when cornered, when facing impossible odds, humans did not surrender. They fought harder. They became more creative. They found ways to win that their enemies never expected. Their history was filled with stories of individuals who should have died, should have given up, should have accepted defeat, but simply refused. They called these people heroes. They taught their children to admire those who never stopped fighting. Crixa thought about Archon Velthrix's threat to destroy the human homeworld. She thought about what humans might do in response. They would not beg for mercy. They would not surrender. They would find a way to hurt the Confederation, even if it took them 1,000 years, because humans did not stop. They did not forget. They did not forgive. She gathered her findings and requested an urgent meeting with the Archon himself. Velthrix listened to her report with growing impatience. "You waste my time with stories about primitive hunters and ancient weapons," he said. "These humans have no fleet. They have no army. They cannot harm us. Archon, with respect, I believe you are underestimating them." "I am underestimating 3 unarmed diplomats? I am telling you that these are not ordinary beings. They come from a world that should have killed them 100 times over. They have survived plagues, wars, natural disasters, and weapons that could crack their planet in half. They have done this not through luck, but through pure determination. They refuse to die." Velthrix made a dismissive sound. "All species think they are special. All species believe they are survivors. When our fleet arrives at their world, they will learn the truth." Crixa stood her ground. "Then why did they send only 3 people? Why no weapons, no defenses, no ships? If they knew we would threaten them, why did they come here at all?" The Archon paused. It was a good question. The species facing extinction should be building armies and preparing for war. Instead, the humans had sent a handful of diplomats to talk. "Perhaps they are simply foolish," he suggested. "Or perhaps they know something we do not." Crixa placed her final piece of evidence on the table. It was a translation of an old human text, a document from one of their ancient warriors. "If you know the enemy and know yourself, You need not fear the result of 100 battles, she read aloud. The humans have spent decades studying us before making contact. They know our supply lines, our political divisions, our biological weaknesses. They know us better than we know ourselves. She looked at the Archon with serious eyes. And we know almost nothing about them. We did not even know they existed until they chose to reveal themselves. Ask yourself, Archon, why would a species with no weapons walk into the heart of their enemy's power? What do they know that we do not? What are they planning that we cannot see? Velthrix said nothing for a long moment. Continue watching them, he ordered finally. Report anything unusual. As Crixa left the chamber, she felt certain that something terrible was coming. The humans sat in their comfortable rooms, eating their meals and asking their questions, and everyone around them continued to underestimate them. But Crixa had seen the data. She had read the history. She understood what humans were capable of when they decided to fight, and she was very, very afraid. Archon Velthrix did not sleep that night. He sat alone in his chambers, staring at the intelligence reports, trying to find a way out of the trap that had closed around him. For 12,000 years, the Confederation had ruled through fear. They had shown their enemies the size of their fleet, the power of their weapons, the certainty of destruction for any who resisted. Every species had understood the same simple truth: fight and die, or submit and live. But these humans did not fear death. They had lived with the threat of extinction for generations and learned to ignore it. They had pointed weapons at each other capable of destroying their entire world, and they had simply carried on with their lives. How do you frighten a species that has already accepted the worst? By morning, the Archon had made his decision. He would not show weakness. He would not negotiate with these creatures as equals. He would demonstrate the full might of the Confederation and force them to submit. He summoned the humans to the Grand Chamber. The room was filled with soldiers this time. Every council member was present. Warships moved into position outside the station, visible through the massive windows. The message was clear. The time for talking was over. Ambassador Vasquez entered alone. Her companions had been detained in their quarters. She walked through the rows of armed guards without hesitation, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. She stopped before the throne and looked up at Velthrix with calm eyes. "Where are your companions?" the Archon demanded. "Having breakfast with your junior diplomats," Vasquez replied. "Lovely people. Very open once you get them talking." A murmur ran through the chamber. The humans had been under constant surveillance. How had they managed to continue building relationships even now? Velthrix leaned forward, his voice cold with anger. "You have wasted enough of our time. Today you will accept our terms or face the consequences." And what consequences would those be? Destruction. Complete and total. Your planet burned to ash. Your species erased from history. Every human who has ever lived forgotten as if they never existed. Vasquez nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. "That is certainly one option. It is the only option. You have no fleet to stop us. No weapons to fight us. No allies to help you. You are 3 people alone in the heart of enemy territory, surrounded by the greatest military force the galaxy has ever known." "Yes," Vasquez agreed. "That is all true." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. The guards raised their weapons, ready to fire. But all she did was press a button, and a holographic display appeared in the air between her and the throne dot. It showed a map of Confederation space. Every system, every planet, every station. Supply routes glowed in blue. Military bases pulsed in red. Agricultural worlds shimmered in green. "We have been watching you for 30 years, Vasquez said. "We know the location of every ship in your fleet. We know which worlds produce your food and which ones refine your fuel. We know the shipping schedules, the maintenance cycles, the gaps in your defense networks. She touched the display and new information appeared. Names and faces. Political leaders, military commanders, intelligence officers. Their secrets, their weaknesses, their hidden shamas. We know which of your council members are corrupt. We know which generals are incompetent. We know which species hate you and dream of freedom. The display changed again. Medical data now. Disease profiles, genetic vulnerabilities, immune system analyses. We know which plagues would kill your ruling species while leaving others untouched. We have samples of 17 such diseases in secure facilities on Earth. We have survived all of them. You would not. Velthrix's claws dug into his throne. You threaten us with weapons you do not have. I am not threatening you, Vasquez said. I am explaining what will happen if you choose war. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. You can destroy Earth. You have the power to do that. But you cannot destroy humanity. We are already spread across dozens of worlds you have not discovered. We have agents in places you would never suspect. We have been planning for this moment for 30 years. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of council members, diplomats, soldiers. If you kill us, nothing happens tomorrow. Maybe nothing happens next year or next decade. You will think you have won. You will return to your conquests and your dominance. And slowly, gradually, things will begin to go wrong. The display shifted to show economic data. Trade routes fragmenting. Resource shipments delayed. Prices rising. Shortages spreading. Your food production will fail. Not all at once, but piece by piece. A disease here, a drought there. Always deniable. Always appearing natural. Political charts appeared next. Unrest growing among conquered species. Protests turning to riots. Loyalists becoming traitors. Your subject peoples will rise against you. Not because we armed them, but because we gave them hope. We taught them that the Confederation can be resisted. That your power is not absolute. Finally, the display showed the Archon himself. His allies, his enemies, his secrets. Your own council will turn on you. The ambitious will see opportunity. The fearful will seek new masters. The resentful will finally have their revenge. Vasquez closed the display and stood in silence. This is what we do, she said. We do not conquer with weapons. We conquer with time. We are patient beyond your understanding. We will wait generations if we must. And in the end, we will win. Not because we are stronger, but because we refuse to lose. She smiled then, that same calm smile she had worn since arriving. Or you can choose peace. The chamber was absolutely silent. Every being present understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Confederation faced an enemy it could not defeat through force. What do you want? Velthrix asked, his voice barely a whisper. Partnership, Vasquez said. Real partnership, between equals. Trade agreements that benefit both sides. Cultural exchange programs that build understanding. A seat at your council table, not as servants, but as allies. She took another step forward, close enough now to touch the throne. Work with us, and you gain access to the most adaptable species in the galaxy. We will help you solve problems you did not know you had. We will make your confederation stronger than you ever imagined. Our creativity, our persistence, our absolute refusal to accept defeat. All of these become your advantages instead of your threats. Her eyes met the Archon's directly. Humanity does not want to destroy you. We did not spend 30 years preparing for war because we wanted war. We did it because we wanted peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from mutual respect, not domination. She extended her hand toward him, palm open. So here is our offer one final time. Take our hand and build something new together. Or refuse and spend the rest of eternity looking over your shoulder, wondering when the knife will fall. The silence stretched on forever. Every council member held their breath. Every soldier waited for orders. Archon Velthrix looked at the small human standing before him. She was weak, fragile, unarmed. She should have been nothing, but she had walked into the heart of his empire and dismantled it without firing a single shot. She had proven that power meant nothing against an enemy who refused to be afraid. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Confederation surrendered not to a fleet, not to an army, not to a weapon of any kind. They surrendered to 3 unarmed humans who had taught them a truth they would never forget. There are some enemies you cannot defeat. There are some species you can only befriend. Humanity smiled and shook the Archon's claw, and a new era began among the stars.